The summer heat bore down on New Mexico territory in 1876 with a vengeance that seemed personal. Dust devils danced across the flat expanse where the town of Clearwater Springs had sprouted like a stubborn weed, refusing to die despite the harshness of the land. The settlement consisted of little more than a dozen ramshackle buildings, a trading post, a saloon that doubled as a courthouse, and a livery stable that smelled of manure and desperation. On this particular August morning, the air shimmered with heat as a crowd gathered in the town square. It wasn't much of a square, just a cleared patch of earth where wagons could turn around, but today it served a darker purpose. A makeshift platform had been erected, little more than planks laid across barrels, and upon it stood 3 young Navajo women, their dark hair matted with dust, their eyes hollow with exhaustion and terror. The auctioneer was a man named Dodd, a former buffalo hunter whose trade had dried up along with his conscience. He wielded a gavel fashioned from a wagon spoke and addressed the crowd with the enthusiasm of a carnival barker. His voice carried across the assembled men, ranchers, drifters, prospectors, all drawn by the spectacle of human misery dressed up as commerce. "Fine specimens, gentlemen," Dodd called out, his voice oily with false cheer. "Young, strong, able-bodied. Start the bidding at $2 for the lot." Among the crowd stood a man who didn't belong there, not in spirit anyway. His name was Samuel Harrison, though most folks called him Sam, and he owned a modest horse ranch about 15 miles north of town. He was 38 years old, tall and lean with the kind of build that came from years of hard work rather than natural gifts. His face was weathered, carved with lines around his eyes from squinting into too many sunrises. His hair, once dark brown, had begun its slow retreat to gray at the temples. He wore simple clothes, a cotton shirt the color of faded denim, canvas trousers held up by worn leather suspenders, and boots that had seen better decades. Sam had ridden into town for salt and sugar, mundane necessities that his isolated life demanded. He hadn't expected to stumble into an auction of human beings, though he'd heard such things happened in the territories. Hearing about evil and witnessing it were 2 different things entirely. The 3 women on the platform ranged in age. The eldest looked to be in her late 20s, her face set in an expression of fierce defiance despite her circumstances. The middle sister appeared younger, perhaps 23 or 24, with softer features but eyes that darted nervously across the crowd. The youngest couldn't have been more than 19, and she alone showed tears, though she tried to hide them by keeping her head bowed. Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach as the bidding began. A prospector offered $1. Another man, drunk despite the early hour, shouted 50 cents and laughed at his own joke. The auctioneer's face reddened with irritation at the low offers. "Come now, gentlemen," Dodd pressed. "These aren't worn-out pack mules. These are prime workers. Think of all the labor you'll get." The way he said it made Sam's hands curl into fists. He'd seen cruelty before. The West specialized in it. He'd watched men shoot each other over card games, seen cattle die slow deaths in drought, witnessed the aftermath of raids and counter-raids. But there was something about this casual dehumanization, this reduction of souls to livestock, that ignited a rage in him he hadn't felt in years. A rancher from the Southern Valley, a man named Hutchins with a reputation for meanness, offered $2. The auctioneer's gavel began to rise. $5, Sam heard himself say. The crowd turned as one, surprised by both the amount and the speaker. Sam Harrison was known as a quiet man, someone who kept to himself and avoided town politics. His sudden bid drew stares and whispers. Hutchins spat in the dirt. "You gone soft, Harrison? What you want with 3 squaws?" Sam ignored him, keeping his eyes on the auctioneer. $5. Are we doing business or not? Dodd grinned, sensing profit. Any advance on $5? Hutchins muttered something obscene but didn't raise the bid. No one else spoke. The gavel came down with a crack that sounded too much like a rifle shot. Sold to Sam Harrison for $5. Sam pushed through the crowd, fishing coins from his pocket. His hands shook slightly as he counted out the money, not from fear but from barely contained fury at what he was participating in, even as rescue. He handed the coins to Dodd, who bid each one to verify its authenticity before nodding. "They're yours," Dodd said, gesturing to the platform. "Good luck with them." Sam climbed the rickety steps and approached the three women. Up close, he could see the rope burns on their wrists, the bruises on their arms, the way they stood close together as if proximity could shield them from whatever came next. They watched him with the wariness of animals that had been beaten too often. "I'm going to untie you," Sam said quietly, keeping his voice as unthreatening as possible. "Then we're going to walk to my horse. Slowly. Nobody's going to hurt you." The eldest sister said something in Navajo, her tone sharp and questioning. Sam shook his head. "I don't understand," he admitted. "But you're safe now. As safe as I can make you, anyway." He produced a knife, and all three women tensed. Sam showed them his empty hand, palm up, then carefully cut through the ropes binding their wrists. The youngest sister, freed first, immediately reached for her siblings. The eldest rubbed her wrists, never taking her eyes off Sam's face. The walk through town to where Sam's horse was tied felt like a mile, though it was barely 100 yards. Men stared. Some called out crude suggestions. Others laughed. A few looked troubled but said nothing. Silence could be its own form of cowardice, Sam thought. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Rust, stood patiently at the hitching post. Sam had also brought a pack mule loaded with supplies. He gestured to the animals. "It's going to be crowded," he said, knowing they couldn't understand but needing to fill the silence with something other than the jeers from the saloon. "My ranch is a few hours north. We'll make it before dark." He helped each woman mount, the eldest and middle sister on Rust, the youngest on the mule with the supplies redistributed. Sam walked alongside, leading both animals. He could feel the weight of the town's gaze on his back as they left Clearwater Springs behind, but he didn't look back. The journey north took them through terrain that shifted gradually from dusty flats to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pinyon. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and Sam stopped twice to let everyone drink from his canteen. The women accepted the water but remained silent, communicating with each other in soft Navajo that Sam couldn't decipher. He found himself studying them when he thought they weren't looking. The eldest had a proud bearing despite everything, her spine straight, her jaw set. She wore what had once been a traditional Navajo dress, now torn and stained. Her hair, black as midnight, hung in a thick braid down her back. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they missed nothing. The middle sister seemed more cautious, constantly checking on her younger sibling. She had a gentler face, though Sam suspected she could be just as fierce if circumstances demanded. Her dress was in slightly better condition, and she wore a small silver pendant around her neck that she touched frequently, as if drawing strength from it. The youngest looked exhausted beyond measure. She swayed slightly on the mule, and Sam worried she might fall. When they stopped for the second water break, he noticed she had a fever. Her skin was hot to the touch when he helped her down, and her eyes were glassy. The eldest sister noticed his concern and placed herself between Sam and the youngest, protective and fierce. Sam raised his hands, palms out. "She's sick," he said, pointing to the youngest and then touching his own forehead to indicate fever. "I'm trying to help." Whether she understood his words or his gesture, something in her posture softened slightly. She turned to examine her sister, speaking rapidly in Navajo. The middle sister joined them, and they had a quick, intense conversation. Finally, the eldest looked at Sam and nodded once, a gesture that seemed to cost her pride but acknowledged necessity. They continued on, Sam pushing the pace as much as he dared. His ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It wasn't much to look at, just a cabin with a barn, a corral, and a few outbuildings scattered across a valley where a creek provided year-round water. But it was home, and more importantly, it was safe. Sam helped the women dismount and led them into the cabin. The interior was Spartan, functional rather than comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A table with 2 chairs sat near the window. His bed occupied the far corner, a simple frame with a mattress stuffed with straw and covered with wool blankets. Shelves held dishes, supplies, and a few books. It was the home of a man who lived alone and didn't expect company. "You can have the bed," Sam said, gesturing to the 3 women and then to his sleeping area. "All of you. I'll sleep in the barn." The eldest sister watched him, trying to parse his meaning from his gestures. Sam pantomimed sleeping on the bed, pointing to them, then pantomimed sleeping elsewhere and pointed to himself. Understanding flickered in her eyes, followed by suspicion. Men who bought women at auction didn't usually offer them their beds and sleep elsewhere. Sam busied himself starting a fire and putting a pot of water on to heat. He had some dried beef, beans, and cornmeal. Not a feast, but it would do. While the water heated, he went to the barn and returned with clean blankets and a basin of water. "For washing," he said, setting the basin on the table. He demonstrated by washing his own hands and face, then offered them a bar of lye soap. The youngest sister had slumped against the wall, clearly struggling. The eldest made a decision. She approached Sam and, in careful, halting English, said, "Water. Hot. For her." So she spoke some English. Sam nodded and quickly heated water for tea, adding some herbs he kept for illness, nothing special, just sage and mint that sometimes helped with fevers. He offered the cup to the eldest, who sniffed it suspiciously before tasting a small sip. Apparently satisfied it wasn't poison, she helped her youngest sister drink. That night, Sam prepared a simple meal and left it on the table before retreating to the barn as promised. He made himself a bedroll in the hay loft, Rust and the mule munching contentedly below. Sleep didn't come easily. He kept thinking about the auction, the casual cruelty, the way no one had questioned the fundamental wrongness of what was happening. He thought about the 3 women in his cabin, wondering what horrors they'd endured before reaching that platform. When dawn broke, Sam woke stiff and covered in hay. He tended to the animals first, then approached the cabin cautiously, knocking on his own door before entering. The women were awake, huddled together near the fireplace. They'd eaten some of the food he'd left. The youngest looked slightly better, her fever having broken in the night. "Morning," Sam said, keeping his voice gentle. He went to the fire and started coffee, the familiar ritual helping to ease the awkwardness. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need. No one's going to hurt you here." The eldest sister studied him for a long moment, then spoke. "You buy us. Now what?" Her English was limited but clear. Sam turned to face her directly. "Now nothing. You're not slaves. You're not property. You're free to leave whenever you want, or you can stay and help around the ranch. Either way, you'll be treated with respect." She translated for her sisters, their faces showing disbelief. Trust wasn't something that could be bought with kind words, and Sam knew it. He'd have to prove his intentions through actions, day by day. "We stay," the eldest said finally. "For now. We see." It was a beginning, tentative and fragile, but a beginning nonetheless. Over the following days, a routine began to emerge. Sam showed them around the ranch, introducing them to the horses, demonstrating the chores that needed doing, always careful to ask rather than demand. The women remained cautious, keeping together, watching Sam for any sign of the cruelty they'd learned to expect from men. The eldest sister revealed her name was Desba, which she said meant, going to war. It suited her. The middle sister was called Helona, meaning, happy fortune, a name that seemed tragically ironic given her circumstances. The youngest was Elu, meaning, full of grace, and she still moved tentatively, her illness having weakened her. Sam learned they were sisters by blood, daughters of a Navajo family that had been torn apart during the forced relocations years earlier. They'd been attempting to return to their homeland when they were captured by raiders who saw opportunity in their vulnerability. The auction in Clearwater Springs had been just the latest degradation in a long series of horrors. Desba spoke the most English, having learned it from missionaries as a child. Halona understood more than she could speak. Elu knew only a few words. They taught Sam phrases in Navajo, and he taught them more English, their languages meeting awkwardly in the middle. The work on the ranch was endless, as it always was. Sam broke horses for sale, tended his small herd, repaired fences, hauled water, hunted game. The women helped where they could, initially hesitant but growing more confident as days passed without violence. Desba proved skilled with horses, her touch gentle but firm. Halona had a gift for knowing when animals were sick or injured. Elu, still recovering, did lighter work around the cabin, cooking and mending. Sam made sure they understood they could leave at any time. He drew them a map showing the route to Navajo lands, about 200 miles west. He offered them supplies for the journey. But they stayed, not quite trusting him, but trusting the world beyond his ranch even less. Word spread, as it always did in the territories. Sam Harrison had bought 3 Navajo women and was keeping them at his ranch. The gossip mutated as it traveled. Some said he was running a brothel. Others claimed he'd gone native, abandoned white civilization. A few praised him for his charity, though their praise felt hollow, tainted by condescension. Sam ignored the talk until it arrived on his doorstep in the form of 3 riders. They came on a Thursday morning, about 2 weeks after the auction. Sam was working in the corral when he spotted them approaching. He recognized 2 of them, neighbors of sorts, men who owned spreads to the south. The third was Hutchins, the rancher who'd bid against him at the auction. Sam met them at the property line, rifle held loosely in his hands. Not pointed at them, but present. "Hutchins," he said by way of greeting. "What brings you up here?" "Concerned citizens visit, Harrison," Hutchins said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "Checking on you. Making sure everything's proper." "Everything's fine. You can head back now." One of the other men, a rancher named Polk, spoke up. "Thing is, Sam, people are talking. You got 3 squaws up here. Folks are wondering about your intentions." "My intentions are my business. When it affects the whole territory, it becomes everyone's business," Hutchins said. "You're setting a bad example. Making other Indians think they can just settle on white land." Sam's grip on the rifle tightened. "These women are under my protection. They work for their keep, same as any ranch hand. Nothing illegal about it." "Depends on how you look at it," Hutchins said, his eyes narrowing. "Indian women got a way of disappearing. Be a shame if something happened to them." It was a threat, barely veiled. Sam raised the rifle slightly, not quite pointing it but making his meaning clear. "If anyone tries to harm them, I'll consider it an attack on my property and respond accordingly. We clear?" The 3 men exchanged glances. Violence hung in the air like the smell of ozone before a storm. Finally, Polk raised his hands in a placating gesture. "No need for trouble, Sam. We're just looking out for the community. Then look somewhere else." They left, but Sam knew they'd be back, if not them then others like them. The West had little patience for men who stepped outside expected behavior. He walked back to the cabin where Desba stood on the porch, having watched the entire exchange. "They come back?" she asked. "Maybe." She nodded, her expression grim. "We bring trouble. You didn't bring anything. Trouble was already here, built into the system." Sam leaned his rifle against the wall. "But you should know, staying here might get dangerous." Desba spoke to her sisters in rapid Navajo, a long explanation with frequent gestures. They responded, their voices rising in what sounded like argument but might have been normal conversation. Finally, Desba turned back to Sam. "We stay. We fight if needed. I'm not asking you to fight." "Not asking," she said firmly. "We choose." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared purpose. They weren't rescuer and rescued anymore. They were allies. The summer wore on, hot and dry. The creek that watered Sam's ranch dropped to a trickle, and water had to be rationed carefully. The horses grew restless in the heat, and tempers frayed. But within the boundaries of the ranch, a different kind of growth was happening. Desba's English improved rapidly, and she began to share stories of her people with Sam. She told him about the long walk, the forced relocation of the Navajo people years earlier, the death march to Bosque Redondo where thousands had died. She told him about her childhood before the soldiers came, when her people had been free to move across the land, living in harmony with the seasons. Sam, in turn, shared his own story. He'd come west after the war, one of thousands of young men looking for a fresh start away from the battlefields that had claimed so many. He'd drifted for years, working ranches, mining camps, anywhere that would pay. He'd saved enough to buy this land and had been here for 8 years, alone except for the horses. "Why alone?" Desba asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Halona and Elu were inside preparing dinner. Sam considered the question. "Easier, I guess. Don't have to worry about anyone but myself." "Lonely," Desba said. It wasn't a question. "Sometimes." She nodded, understanding. "We lonely too. Even together, we lonely. Always running, always afraid. No home. You have a home here, long as you want it." Desba looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face for something, truth maybe, or confirmation of what she'd begun to suspect. "You different," she said finally. "Why?" Sam thought about the question for a long time. "I saw too much death in the war," he said eventually. "Too much cruelty. When it ended, I promised myself I'd try to be different. Try to leave things better than I found them. Don't always succeed, but I try." "You succeed with us," Desba said quietly. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Sam felt something shift in his chest, a recognition he wasn't quite ready to name. He'd spent so many years alone, building walls around himself, protecting against loss and pain. But these women, Desba especially, were finding cracks in those walls. "We should eat," he said, breaking the moment. "Food's getting cold." As summer peaked and began its slow descent toward fall, life on the ranch found its rhythm. The women became essential to its operation, not as servants but as partners. Desba worked alongside Sam with the horses, her natural affinity with the animals making her invaluable. She could calm a spooked horse with a touch, read the health of an animal at a glance. Sam found himself relying on her judgment more and more. Halona discovered a talent for tracking and hunting. She could read signs in the dirt that Sam walked right past. Under her guidance, they never lacked for meat, and she set up a small smokehouse to preserve what they didn't eat fresh. She was quieter than her sisters, but her competence spoke volumes. Elu, fully recovered from her illness, transformed the cabin. She cleaned and organized, made curtains from spare cloth, planted a small garden near the house that somehow thrived despite the heat. Her presence brought a gentleness to the rough edges of ranch life. She sang while she worked, traditional Navajo songs that Sam didn't understand but found beautiful nonetheless. But the peace was fragile, built on land that others claimed and resented their presence on. The first real test came in September. Sam had gone to town for supplies, a necessary evil he'd been putting off but couldn't avoid any longer. He left early, planning to be back by nightfall. The women stayed at the ranch, Desba armed with an old rifle Sam had taught her to shoot, Halona with her bow. The riders came in the afternoon, 5 men wearing bandanas over their faces. They weren't subtle about their intentions. They fired shots in the air, whooping and hollering as they rode toward the cabin. Desba saw them coming and immediately got her sisters inside, barring the door. "We know you're in there," one of the men called. His voice was muffled by the bandana, but Desba thought she recognized it. Hutchins, maybe, or one of his men. "Harrison's not here to protect you. You got 2 choices. Come out peaceful, or we burn you out." Inside the cabin, Elu clutched her sister's arm, terrified. Halona checked her arrows, her face set in grim determination. Desba moved to the window, rifle ready. "We have guns," she called out. "You come closer, we shoot." Laughter greeted this announcement. "You think we're scared of squaws with guns? We're doing Harrison a favor, getting rid of you." One of the men rode closer, pulling out a torch. Desba aimed carefully, remembering everything Sam had taught her, and fired. The bullet kicked up dirt inches from the horse's hooves. The animal reared, and the rider barely kept his seat. "Next one hits horse," Desba called. "Then rider." The men conferred among themselves, apparently not expecting armed resistance. While they argued, Halona slipped out the back window with her bow. She moved silently, circling around to get a better angle. When one of the riders dismounted to approach the cabin on foot, she put an arrow through his hat, pinning it to the ground 3 feet away. The man yelped and scrambled back to his horse. "Crazy bitches," someone shouted. "Let's get out of here." But one man, drunk or stubborn or both, charged toward the cabin on horseback. Desba fired again, this time aiming to wound rather than kill. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, and he screamed, wheeling his horse away. The others grabbed his reins and retreated in a cloud of dust and curses. When Sam returned an hour later, he found the women on the porch, armed and alert. Desba quickly explained what had happened, her English rushed but clear. Sam's face went pale, then red with anger. "I shouldn't have left you alone," he said. "We not alone," Desba corrected. "We together. We strong." Sam looked at the 3 of them, these women who'd been sold like livestock and had somehow found the strength to defend themselves, defend his home. Pride mixed with fear in his chest. "This is going to get worse before it gets better," he warned. "We know," Desba said. "We stay anyway." That night, Sam didn't sleep in the barn. He made a bedroll on the floor of the cabin, rifle close at hand. They took turns keeping watch. Around midnight, during Desba's shift, Sam found himself unable to sleep. He sat up, and in the dim firelight, their eyes met. "You afraid?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "Not for me. For you 3. "We afraid too," Desba said. "But fear not new. We live with fear long time. This different. Here we can fight. You shouldn't have to. World full of things we shouldn't have to do." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You good man, Samuel Harrison. Rare thing." The use of his full name, the gentle tone, it all hit Sam harder than he expected. He'd spent so long keeping people at a distance, protecting himself from caring too much. But here, in the quiet darkness, he felt those walls crumbling. "Desba," he started, then stopped, not sure what he wanted to say. She smiled, a small, sad smile that carried the weight of everything unspoken between them. "I know," she said simply. "Not now. But maybe someday." The next morning, Sam rode to town with a different purpose. He went to the sheriff's office, such as it was. The sheriff, a grizzled old Buffalo soldier named Moses Crawford, listened to Sam's account without interruption. "Those men attacked my property," Sam finished. "I want something done about it." Crawford leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "You know who they were?" "Masked, but I have suspicions." Suspicions won't hold up. Need proof. Crawford studied Sam with tired eyes. Look, Harrison, I'll level with you. Most folks in this territory don't care much about what happens to Indians. Some actively want them gone. You're making yourself a target by protecting those women. That's not law, Sam said. That's cowardice. Maybe so, but it's reality. Crawford sighed. I'll make inquiries, but don't expect much. My advice? Either send those women on their way or be prepared to defend your ranch, because trouble's coming and I can't stop it. Sam left the sheriff's office feeling hollow. The law, which was supposed to protect everyone, had shown its true colors. Justice was selective, available only to those who fit within certain categories. The rest had to fend for themselves. He returned to the ranch and called a meeting with the three women. They sat around the table, afternoon sunlight streaming through the window, and Sam laid out the situation honestly. The law won't help us, he said. People in town want you gone, and they're willing to use violence to make it happen. I can't guarantee your safety anymore. He paused, forcing himself to say the next part. I think you should go. I'll give you horses, supplies, weapons, everything you need to reach your homeland. It's not safe here. The three sisters exchanged glances, having a rapid conversation in Navajo. Finally, Desba turned to Sam. We talk, she said. All of us together. You, me, sisters. Equal. Sam nodded. All right. Desba spoke first. You save us. Give us dignity when world take it away. Give us home. We not leave easy. Helona added her voice, her English improving daily. This land hard for everyone. Harder for us, yes. But running always hard too. Tired of running. Elu, the youngest, surprised Sam by speaking up in halting but clear English. Here we have choice. Out there, no choice. Just survival. But survival is what matters, Sam argued. I can't protect you from everything. We not ask for protection, Desba said firmly. We ask for partnership. We stand with you, you stand with us. We defend together. It could mean killing, Sam said bluntly. Those men will come back, more of them. Someone will die. Then we die free, Desba said, not running, not slave. Free. Sam looked at each of them in turn, seeing the determination in their faces. They'd made their choice, fully aware of the consequences. Who was he to deny them that agency? All right, he said finally. We stand together. They spent the next few days preparing. Sam taught the women more about shooting, improving their aim and speed. Helona shared her knowledge of Navajo defensive tactics, ways to use the terrain to their advantage. They stockpiled ammunition, reinforced the cabin's doors and windows, and developed plans for various scenarios. Elu proved surprisingly tactical, suggesting they dig a root cellar that could double as a hiding place. Not for hiding scared, she explained. For hide smart. Surprise attack. The work brought them closer together, forging them into something more than just people sharing space. They became a unit, each person's strengths compensating for others' weaknesses. During this time, Sam became aware of how his feelings for Desba had evolved. It wasn't sudden, there had been no single moment of realization, just a gradual recognition that she'd become essential to him. Not in the way a tool was essential, but in the way sunlight and water were essential, fundamental elements without which life felt incomplete. He caught himself watching her work with the horses, admiring not just her skill but the grace with which she moved, the strength in her hands, the concentration in her face. He looked forward to evening conversations on the porch, when they'd sit side by side and talk about everything and nothing. He noticed the way lamplight caught in her dark hair, the rare times she laughed at something he said, the careful way she'd corrected his Navajo pronunciation, her fingers briefly touching his lips to show the right position. Desba, for her part, seemed equally aware of the shift between them. Sam would catch her looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between curiosity and something deeper. Once, when he'd injured his hand on barbed wire, she'd tended it with a gentleness that went beyond practicality, her fingers lingering on his wrist. But neither spoke of it directly. The timing felt wrong, with danger circling their little sanctuary. Romance seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford, a distraction from the survival that consumed their days. The attack, when it came, arrived with autumn's first cold snap. They came at dawn, a dozen men on horseback, their faces covered but their intentions clear. This wasn't meant to be a warning. This was meant to be an ending. Sam saw them first, awake before sunrise as always. He fired the warning shot they'd agreed on, one shot from his pistol to alert the women. By the time the riders reached the ranch, everyone was in position. Sam took the front of the cabin, rifle ready. Desba positioned herself at the side window, her shooting improved dramatically over the past weeks. Helona waited in the barn with her bow, able to provide covering fire from an unexpected angle. Elu, despite her insistence on fighting, had been relegated to loading weapons, a crucial role that kept her safer than being in direct combat. The riders spread out, trying to surround the cabin. Their leader, a man Sam now recognized as Hutchins even with his face covered, called out. "Harrison! Send out those squaws and we'll let you live. This is your last chance." "No deal," Sam shouted back. "Get off my land. You're choosing them over your own kind? Over white men? I'm choosing right over wrong. You wouldn't know the difference." Hutchins' response was to signal his men. They opened fire, bullets thudding into the cabin walls, shattering one window. Sam returned fire, careful to make each shot count. Desba fired from her position, her shot grazing one rider's arm. The man howled and wheeled his horse away. From the barn, Helona's arrows found their marks. She targeted the horses, not to kill them but to create chaos. 3 horses reared and bolted, throwing their riders. In the confusion, Sam and Desba picked off 2 more men, wounding them enough to take them out of the fight. But the attackers had numbers on their side. They dismounted and began a more coordinated assault, using the outbuildings for cover. One man reached the cabin wall with a torch, intending to set it ablaze. Elu, seeing this through a crack in the door, made a split-second decision. She burst out the back door with a bucket of water from their emergency supply and flung it at the would-be arsonist. The torch sputtered and died. Her bravery nearly cost her life. A rider spotted her and aimed his gun. Sam saw it happening as if in slow motion. He fired without thinking, his bullet catching the man in the shoulder. The man's shot went wide, missing Elu, who scrambled back inside. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably no more than 30 minutes. The attackers, expecting an easy victory, found themselves facing determined resistance. They began to waver, some pulling back to tend to their wounded. Then came the sound that changed everything, hoofbeats, many of them, approaching from the north. Both sides froze, uncertain. Over the ridge came a dozen riders, but these weren't reinforcements for the attackers. They were Navajo warriors, led by an older man with silver in his hair. The man raised his hand, and his warriors spread out, surrounding the attackers. He spoke in clear English, his voice carrying authority. "These women are under Navajo protection. You attack them, you attack us. You want war with Navajo people?" The attackers, already bloodied and demoralized, looked to Hutchins for leadership. But Hutchins was staring at the Navajo warriors, calculating odds he clearly didn't like. "This isn't over," he snarled, but he was already backing toward his horse. His men followed, mounting up and riding out fast. The Navajo warriors let them go but followed at a distance to make sure they kept riding. The older Navajo dismounted and approached the cabin. Sam came out warily, rifle lowered but ready. The man studied him with keen eyes, then nodded to himself. "I am Hasten Daga," he said. "Clan uncle to these women. We heard they were here, heard what you did at the auction. Took us time to find them." Desba emerged from the cabin, her face showing shock and joy. She spoke rapidly in Navajo, gesturing to her sisters who came running. There was a tearful reunion, the three women embracing their uncle and the other warriors who were apparently distant relatives. Sam stood back, feeling suddenly like an outsider. He'd known this moment might come, when the women's past caught up with them. He'd told himself he'd be happy for them, that he'd let them go without complaint. But watching Desba in her uncle's arms, he felt something inside him crack. Eventually, Hasten Daga approached him again. "You are Samuel Harrison." "Yes. You bought my nieces at auction." "I did." Sam met his gaze steadily. "To free them, not to own them. They can leave with you right now if they choose." The old man studied him for a long moment. "You fought to protect them. They're under my protection. Or they were. They're your family. You fought with them, not for them," Hasten Daga corrected. "There is a difference." He glanced back at the women, who were talking animatedly with the other Navajo. "My nieces speak highly of you. They say you treat them with honor. They've earned it. They've made this ranch what it is." Hasten Daga nodded slowly. "We came to take them home. Back to our people. But I see now the situation is more complicated." He paused. "We will camp nearby tonight. Tomorrow, we talk more. The women will decide their path." That evening was bittersweet. The Navajo made camp in the meadow near the creek, and Sam's cabin felt empty despite the presence of the three sisters. They moved through their evening chores with distracted efficiency, clearly torn between their old world and their new one. After dinner, Desba found Sam on the porch where he sat watching the campfires in the distance. "You not eat much," she observed, settling beside him. "Not very hungry. You think we leave?" It wasn't a question, but Sam answered anyway. "You should. Your family's here. Your people. You've been running for so long. This is your chance to go home." "What if this is home?" Desba asked softly. Sam turned to look at her, his heart hammering. "Is it?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Before, always dreaming of going back. Back to land of my ancestors, to my people. But now..." She trailed off, searching for words. "Now I think maybe home is not place. Maybe home is people. People who see you, who know you. Who stand with you. Your uncle seems like a good man." "He is. But he not know me now. He know girl I was, not woman I am." She looked at Sam directly. "You know woman I am." The weight of her words hung between them. Sam wanted to reach for her hand but held back, afraid of influencing her decision. "I want you to stay," he said finally, the words coming out rough and uncertain. "God knows I want that. But I want you to be happy more. If that means going with your family, then that's what you should do." "And you? You be happy alone again?" Sam laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I don't think I could go back to that. You three have ruined me for solitude." Desba smiled, and in that smile Sam saw his answer. But she didn't speak it aloud, not yet. The next morning, Hasten Daga requested a formal meeting. Sam, the three sisters, and several of the Navajo warriors gathered near the creek. The old man spoke in Navajo first, addressing his nieces at length. They responded, all three speaking in turn. Then he switched to English for Sam's benefit. "My nieces tell me they wish to stay here," he said. "All three. They say this is where they have found safety and purpose." He studied Sam. They also say you have treated them as equals, not as possessions or servants. This is rare among white men. It's not rare, Sam said. It's just decent. Should be common. Should be, yes. But it is not. Hasten-Daga was quiet for a moment. Among our people, when a man wishes to join with a woman, there are traditions. Gifts are exchanged, families meet, agreements are made. But my nieces have told me they do not wish to return to our lands. They wish to make their lives here. Sam felt Desba's eyes on him but kept his focus on her uncle. I'm not asking them to give up their culture, he said. This ranch can honor both worlds. They're free to practice their traditions, speak their language, maintain their identity. And yet they will live among whites, facing prejudice and danger. That danger exists whether I'm involved or not, Sam pointed out. At least here they have defenses and allies. Hasten-Daga nodded slowly. This is true. He turned to Desba, speaking in Navajo. She responded at length, her voice carrying conviction. Finally, the old man sighed. Very well. My nieces are grown women. They may choose their path. But know this, Samuel Harrison, if you betray their trust, if you cause them harm, you will answer to all of our people. I understand. And I give you my word I'll protect them with my life. I believe you will try. Hasten-Daga stood, indicating the meeting was over. We will stay one more day, then return to our lands. But we will send riders to check on our nieces. Regularly. They're always welcome. The Navajo departed the next afternoon, leaving behind gifts of woven blankets and silver jewelry for the sisters. Hasten-Daga embraced each of his nieces, speaking soft words Sam couldn't hear. When he came to Desba, the conversation was longer and more intense. She nodded several times, tears on her cheeks, before he finally released her. As the riders disappeared over the horizon, Sam felt the weight of responsibility settle more heavily on his shoulders. The sisters had chosen to stay, but that choice came with obligations he had to honor. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to ranch life. With the immediate threat past, they could focus on more than just survival. Sam began teaching the women about horse breeding and training in earnest, sharing knowledge he'd accumulated over years. Desba proved to have an intuitive understanding of bloodlines and temperament. Halona became expert at breaking young horses to saddle. Even Elu, who'd shown no particular interest in horses before, developed a talent for recognizing quality in potential breeding stock. The ranch began to prosper in ways it never had when Sam worked alone. Their reputation grew, not for scandal as before, but for the quality of their horses. Buyers came from far away, some skeptical at first about doing business with that ranch where Indians live, but won over by the animal's obvious excellence. Sam made sure the women were treated as partners in all business dealings. At first, buyers would address him exclusively, but he made a point of deferring to Desba or Halona on questions about specific horses. Some men refused to conduct business this way and left empty-handed. Others grumbled but accepted the arrangement when they saw the quality of the stock. Money began to come in, more than Sam had ever made on his own. He split it 4 ways, equal shares, over the women's initial protests. We live here free, Desba argued. You don't owe us money. You work here, Sam countered. Work deserves fair pay. Besides, this is your ranch as much as mine now. The comment sparked an idea. Sam rode to town and spoke with the land agent, then with a lawyer who looked at him like he'd grown a second head. But the lawyer did the paperwork, and 2 weeks later Sam had the documents drawn up. He was signing over equal shares of the ranch to each of the 3 women. When he showed them the papers, they stared in disbelief. You make us owners? Desba asked, her English now nearly fluent. You've earned it. You've built this place as much as I have. White men don't do this, Halona said, speaking more than she usually did. Don't give land to Indians. Then I guess I'm not like most white men. Elu, always the most emotional, started crying. No one ever give us anything. Only take away. The gesture cemented their bond in ways Sam hadn't anticipated. The ranch stopped being his place where they worked and became truly theirs, a shared venture and shared home. They began making improvements they'd hesitated to suggest before, adding a larger barn, expanding the corrals, building a proper bunkhouse that gave everyone more privacy. As autumn deepened into winter, Sam found himself falling into a comfortable domesticity he'd never experienced. Evening meals became communal affairs with laughter and storytelling. Elu taught them Navajo songs. Halona shared legends from her childhood. Sam contributed poorly remembered poetry from his school days, which made everyone laugh at his mangled recitations. But always, there was Desba. She'd grown into her role at the ranch with confidence, speaking up in business dealings, making decisions about breeding stock, managing the finances with a head for numbers that surprised Sam. She'd also grown more beautiful in Sam's eyes, though he recognized she'd always been beautiful and he'd just been too cautious to truly see it. Their connection had deepened through shared work and danger. They'd developed a shorthand of gestures and glances, could predict each other's thoughts, finished each other's sentences. They worked together with the ease of people who'd known each other for decades rather than months. But still, Sam held back. He was 13 years her senior. He was white, she was Navajo. He'd bought her at auction, a fact that haunted him even though his intentions had been pure. The power imbalance, even though he'd tried to eliminate it, still existed in the eyes of society. He couldn't shake the fear that anything between them would be tainted by these realities. Desba seemed to sense his hesitation and didn't push, though sometimes he'd catch her looking at him with an expression of fond exasperation, as if she was waiting for him to catch up to something she'd already figured out. Winter came hard that year. Snow fell heavy in the mountains and temperatures dropped below freezing for weeks. The ranch became isolated, cut off from town by drifts that made the road impassable. They huddled together for warmth, rationed supplies, and focused on keeping the animals alive. It was during this forced isolation that the final walls between Sam and Desba crumbled. They were in the barn late one night, checking on a mare who was close to foaling. The horse was restless, pacing her stall, clearly uncomfortable but not quite ready to deliver. Sam and Desba settled into wait, wrapped in blankets against the cold. "Tell me about before," Desba said softly, her breath misting in the frigid air. "Before the war. Who was Samuel Harrison then?" Sam was quiet for a long time, memories he usually kept locked away surfacing. "Just a kid from Ohio. Wanted to be a teacher, if you can believe that. Loved books, loved learning. Had a girl I planned to marry. What happened? War happened. I enlisted because everyone was enlisting. Thought it would be a grand adventure." His voice turned bitter. "Learned real quick there's nothing grand about killing. Nothing adventurous about watching your friends die. The girl? Married someone else while I was gone. Can't say I blame her. I came back different, harder. She saw it. I saw her seeing it. We both knew it wouldn't work." Desba's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers warm despite the cold. That Sam would have walked past that auction. Probably. War took that man, but maybe gave something back. Made me understand cruelty in a way I couldn't before. Made me hate it enough to do something about it. You saved us, Desba said simply. You saved yourselves. I just gave you a place to do it. Sam. She said his name like a sigh. Why you always do this? Always make yourself small. You are good man. Important man. To me. Desba. No, let me speak. She shifted to face him fully. I know what you think. You think age matter. You think color of skin matter. You think how we meet matter. But here is truth, none of that matter to me. What matters is who you are now. How you treat us. How you see us. I see you, Sam said, his voice rough. God, I see you. That's the problem. I see how strong you are, how smart, how brave. I see everything you could be without someone like me holding you back. Holding me back. Desba laughed, but it wasn't unkind. Sam, you set me free. You give me chance to be who I truly am. How is that holding back? Society will never accept us. You know that. We're already on the edge of what people will tolerate. When did you start caring what people think? The question hit home. Sam had spent his whole life in the West defying convention, choosing his own path regardless of others' opinions. Why was this different? I care because it affects you, he admitted. They'll say terrible things. Call you terrible names. They already do, Desba pointed out. I survive. We survive together, stronger than alone. The mare chose that moment to lie down and begin her labor in earnest. For the next hour, Sam and Desba worked together to help the foal into the world. It was a difficult birth, the foal positioned wrong, and at one point Sam thought they'd lose both mare and baby. But Desba's gentle hands and calm voice soothed the horse while Sam carefully repositioned the foal. When the baby finally slipped free, covered in membrane and fluid, they both laughed with relief and exhaustion. The foal was perfect, a dark bay filly with a white star on her forehead. The mare immediately began cleaning her baby, the bond between them instant and fierce. Sam and Desba sat back, watching the miracle of new life. They were covered in birthing fluids, exhausted, cold, and somehow Sam had never felt more content. Life is fragile, Desba said softly. Here one moment, gone the next. We cannot waste time we have worrying about what others think. She was right. Sam knew she was right. He'd wasted years already, keeping people at arm's length, protecting himself from potential pain by avoiding connection entirely. These women, this beautiful, fierce woman beside him, had taught him that protection came with a cost. Safety meant loneliness. To truly live, you had to risk being hurt. I love you, Sam said, the words emerging like a confession. I've loved you for months. I was just too afraid to say it. Desba smiled, her whole face lighting up despite the dim lantern light. I know. I wait for you to realize. Navajo women are patient. I'm an old fool. You are my old fool, she corrected, and then she was kissing him, her lips cold and then warm against his, tasting like coffee and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sam touched his forehead to hers. Your uncle is going to kill me. Uncle will be happy. He likes you. He told me so before he left. He threatened to have his warriors hunt me down if I hurt you. Yes, but in a proving way. Desba laughed at his expression. Navajo men make threats to show they care. Is complicated. They stayed in the barn until dawn, talking about everything they'd held back, making plans for a future Sam had been too cautious to imagine. When they finally stumbled back to the cabin, hand in hand, Halona and Elu took one look at them and grinned. Finally, Elu said in English. We thought you never admit feelings. We had bets, Halona added. I lose. Think you take longer. Sam felt his face heat with embarrassment, but Desba just laughed. My sisters see everything. No secrets in this family. Family. The word settled around Sam like a warm blanket. He'd found what he'd been missing without knowing he was searching for it. Winter loosened its grip slowly, and spring arrived with mud and meltwater and the promise of new beginnings. Sam and Desba's relationship became openly acknowledged, though they took their time with formalities. Sam wanted to do things properly, to honor both his traditions and hers. When Hasten-Dagger returned in early spring, leading a small group to check on his nieces as promised, Sam asked formally for permission to marry Desba. The old man made him sweat through a long silence before finally grinning. "You think I am surprised?" he asked. "I have eyes. I see how you look at her. How she looks at you." He grew more serious. "You understand this will not be easy. Children of such unions face hardship in both worlds. We'll face it together. You must honor both traditions. Learn our ways, teach her yours. Children should know all parts of themselves." "I want that too." Hasten-Daga nodded. "Then you have my blessing. But ceremony must include Navajo traditions. I will not have my niece married only in white man's way." They planned a ceremony that would honor both cultures. It would be held at the ranch in late spring when travel was easier and more family could attend. In the meantime, Sam threw himself into learning about Navajo marriage customs, studying the language with renewed dedication, and working with the ranch to ensure they could host dozens of guests. Halona and Elu helped with preparations, clearly delighted by the prospect of a wedding. The ranch became a hub of activity, with building and cooking and planning occupying everyone's time. Word spread, as it always did. Some neighbors expressed quiet approval. Others made their disapproval known, though more carefully now that the ranch had proven its strength. A few former friends cut ties entirely, unwilling to associate with a white man who would degrade himself by marrying a Navajo woman. Sam found he didn't care. Their rejection hurt less than he'd expected. He'd spent too long worrying about fitting in, about being accepted by people whose values he didn't share. Desba was worth more than 1,000 fair-weather friends. The wedding took place on a perfect May morning when the wildflowers were in full bloom and the creek ran high with snowmelt. Over 60 people attended, a mix of Navajo families and the few white neighbors who had proven themselves allies. Hasten-Daga performed the traditional Navajo blessing ceremony, while a circuit rider preacher who traveled through the territories handled the Christian portion. Desba wore a traditional Navajo dress of deep blue velvet decorated with silver buttons and turquoise jewelry. Sam wore his best suit, which he'd owned for years but rarely had occasion to wear. They exchanged vows in both English and Navajo, promising to honor each other's traditions and build a life together that transcended the boundaries others tried to impose. When the ceremony ended and they were pronounced married in both traditions, the celebration began. Navajo women had prepared traditional foods. The white guests contributed their own dishes. Music blended, Navajo songs mixing with folk tunes on fiddles and guitars. Children of both cultures ran wild together, finding common ground in play that adults had to work harder to achieve. Sam danced with his bride under the wide sky, surrounded by family, chosen and blood, and felt a peace he'd thought was beyond his reach. The years that followed were not easy, but they were rich with meaning. Sam and Desba built a life that challenged conventions and paid the price for it. They faced discrimination from both white society and some traditional Navajo who disapproved of mixing cultures. Their children, when they came, would face even greater challenges, caught between two worlds and not fully accepted by either. But they also built something extraordinary. Their ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where both cultures were respected, where horses were raised with skill and love, and where anyone who came in good faith would be treated fairly. Halona eventually married a Navajo man who came to help with the horses, and they built a house on the edge of the ranch property. Elu, restless by nature, traveled back to Navajo lands but returned frequently, never settling in one place for long but always considering the ranch her home. The ranch prospered under their shared management. They expanded operations, hired hands from both cultures, and became known for treating workers fairly and paying them well. Other ranchers grumbled about Sam spoiling his workers, but those same ranchers couldn't understand why they struggled to keep good help while Sam's people stayed for years. As Sam aged, he often reflected on how dramatically his life had changed from that day at the Clearwater Springs auction. He'd gone to town for salt and sugar and come home with family. He'd thought he was rescuing 3 women and discovered they'd saved him just as much. He and Desba grew old together, their partnership deepening with each passing season. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, a mix of cultures and traditions that represented a future neither of their peoples had imagined possible. "Do you have regrets?" Desba asked him once, when they were both silver-haired and tired but content. Sam thought about the question seriously, considering all the hardships they'd faced, all the doors that had closed because of their choices. Then he looked at their ranch, their family, the life they'd built together from scraps of hope and determination. "Not a single one," he said. Desba smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart decades earlier. "Good. Because I would not change anything. Not one moment." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the sun set over land that belonged to them in every way that mattered. Not because they'd conquered it, but because they'd honored it, worked it, and built something lasting upon it. Their story became legend in the territory, told and retold with varying degrees of accuracy. Some versions painted Sam as a white savior. Others focused on the scandal of interracial marriage. But those who truly knew them understood the real story was simpler and more profound. It was a story about seeing humanity in people others dismissed. About having the courage to stand against injustice even when it cost you. About love that grew in the hardest soil and bloomed despite everyone saying it couldn't. It was about 3 women sold like cattle who reclaimed their dignity. About a lonely man who found family in unexpected places. About building bridges between worlds and proving that those bridges could hold. When Sam died at 74, Desba sat beside him, holding his hand as she had countless times before. His last words were in Navajo, learned imperfectly but spoken with love. Desba remained at the ranch for another decade, running it with the same skill and determination she'd always shown, until age and illness finally claimed her as well. They were buried together on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky that stretched forever. Their graves were marked simply, with both their names and dates, and beneath in both English and Navajo, they chose love. The ranch continued through their children and grandchildren, evolving but maintaining the principles its founders had established. It became a symbol of what was possible when people chose humanity over prejudice, partnership over power, and love over fear. Years later, historians would debate the details of their story, academics would analyze its cultural significance, and activists would hold it up as either an example of bridge building or cultural assimilation depending on their perspectives. But for the family that carried their legacy forward, the meaning was clear. Sam and Desba had proven that the boundaries society erected between people were artificial, that love and respect could transcend them, and that it was worth fighting for a world where such transcendence was possible. Their story wasn't perfect. They made mistakes, faced failures, endured losses. But through it all, they maintained their commitment to each other and to the vision of a better world they'd glimpsed in those early days at the ranch. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.